died, she had this old chest, and inside we found a secret drawer. And in the secret drawer, wrapped beautifully in velvet, was this whole collection of letters that my grandfather had written her when she was in Martinique and he was in France. That was in 1946 to 1947. So my grandfather was in France trying to make it as a writer, and he had left my grandmother with the 3 children in Martinique, and he wanted to make enough money and establish himself to send for her, which he did manage to do, and he sent for her a year or so later. But as I said, my grandmother was very much in my grandfather's shadow. She was a true Creole Martinican woman. She loved to tell stories. She knew loads of proverbs and songs. And although my grandfather wrote a great deal about Creole culture and said, you know, that it was part of his source of inspiration, he really dismissed, I felt, my grandfather's Creole knowledge. And he didn't think of her as being an intellectual equal. He thought that her stories were a bit silly, and, you know, that she believed things that were, I suppose, made her a bit backward or peasant-like. So I felt that there was a kind of intellectual snobbery that he had towards her that carried on, especially into later life when he separated from her. So I felt, since they both died, but as I've grown older, that I wanted to kind of reclaim that narrative, as Marva was saying, the stories that haven't been told about our grandmothers, because she was a potomitan, is what we say in French. So, you know, she was the cornerstone. She was the of the family, and she brought 3 children up. She was an incredible cook. She was a trained pastry chef. And she was so warm and so loving. She had this big bed in her room, and us grandchildren always were allowed to pile into the bed as long as we didn't wriggle too much. And she'd give us massages with clove oil. And I remember the smell so vividly. So she was a really warm and loving woman. Now this poem is called Undocumented, and it's for my mammy Annie. Undocumented. The tiny drawer inside your dresser is secret, but it pops open to the lightest touch. Inside, we are shocked to find the bundle of his letters snug in their velveteen pouch. We hurriedly unfold, read, wary of the burden of confidences. Each scroll speaks of his longing for you, his wife, and the island left behind, carried over oceans by a tide of hope to the cold white metropole. And so we read, you are more beautiful than brash Parisian women. They are wealthy, but lack your humble grace. And if the grand boulevards take my breath away, when I lie alone in my narrow bed, it's the softness of your hand, the light of fireflies, the steady flight of the Mons Fenil that fill my mind. 1 month later, let's get a little trade going. Send me cinnamon, a packet of vanilla pods. In Paris, they'll fetch triple. In return, parcels of kitchen things, a radio. You'll be the envy of our neighbours. For the radio, invite Monsieur Armand to wire and tune, and Madame Christevine to covet, and place it carefully on the second dresser shelf. And when she's gone, but only when she's gone, find a station with Begin and dance with both our boys. And I, in my icy room, will imagine the sway and tilt of your hips in the warmth of our kitchen. Instructions on thinning pages, kept for decades, but in his things, nothing of your life, of 2 wild boys and baby Jenny heavy in your stomach, of unremitting heat, long, sweaty, lonely nights, the eldest rubbing your swollen feet, and money worry, always money worry. He will call for you, and you will pack off to the world's center. Stand beside the writer on his grand journey. You'll bake cakes, raise children and host, sing Creole lullabies, tell island stories, simple tales, he says, but you're not quite so sure. No long letters reveal your secrets, Mammy. Did he not treasure your replies? And so the life I long to read still hides, undocumented. I have no maps. A granddaughter can only dream into the gaps.
Wow, thank you. I have no maps. But I do think you're finding or creating those maps by reading between the scenes. And a lot of times that is simply what we have to do. And as authors, give ourselves permission to embellish and make up the story. And I've made that commitment and come to that decision that I'm doing that with my family story. Because sometimes for one reason or the other, you will not get the information.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Emily. Any questions or comments? You know what, I like, when I first saw that poem and heard the title, being people from the Caribbean and the whole concept of migration and moving to, developed countries. Of course, I thought of undocumented as in being, an outsider looking to get your papers. And then you play with that idea, then you take it to another level as your mother's narrative not being documented within, your grandmother's, within her husband's narrative, how that part of the story is left out, which simply reminds me of our responsibility in writing these narratives. Thank you.